I think this condition is overdiagnosed. I no longer trust the growth industry that is modern medicine. How many people take a sleep study and don't end up diagnosed with sleep apnea? I'd like to know that one. I went ahead and corrected the errors. What a phenomenal comment for video content. Hey, I'm Jason. I'm a registered polysomnographic technologist. We're going to dive into this question right now. I think this comment and this idea is really something that fuels the idea that all sleep centers, all sleep tests are scams. They're all designed to give you a positive diagnosis. They're all designed to sell you equipment. So let's go ahead and dive into this topic. But first, I got to try to sell you something. Papper people, it's that time of year. It's getting cold outside. We're staying inside. We're all getting sick. We're getting the sniffles. Our nose is full of schnoz. How, I ask, are we supposed to breathe at night with a nasal or nasal pillow mask? Well, head on over to cpapsupplies.com. Now, Lanky here doesn't exactly like a full face mask, but when I do, when I use a full face mask, one of my favorites is the Fisher & Paykel Vitera. Look, Fisher & Paykel gets the shaft as far as masks go, but they make a fantastic full face mask, the Vitera. If I have the sniffles, I can't breathe through my nose, I don't want to sleep like garbage all night, so I bust out my full face mask. If you head on over to cpapsupplies.com, you can order this mask preemptively before you get your nose all clogged up with schnoz. And cpapsupplies.com has agreed for a limited time, December 1st, this thing expires, so don't be coming late to the party going, oh, I missed it, Jason. Go ahead and put the Vitera in your cart, put in discount code TurkeyLanky20. TurkeyLanky20? TurkeyLanky20 saved me $30. That's crazy. But then if you say, hey, Jason, you know what? That's a bad idea. I don't like the Vitera. The Vitera's terrible. They have a 30-day mask guarantee where you can swap that out for another mask, something like the Fisher & Paykel Evora full face mask. Maybe that is to your liking. Anyway, check out the sponsor of this video, cpapsupplies.com, and don't forget to use discount code TurkeyLanky20. Only available for the month of November. All right, let's talk about this. How many people that go to sleep centers or have sleep studies are diagnosed with sleep apnea or some form of sleep apnea? But first I need to tell you exactly where I acquired this information. I didn't get it from any type 3 home sleep tests. I can tell you that right now. Those are highly inaccurate. I don't trust the data from those. Where I did get the information is one source is my own home sleep diagnostics company called AXG Sleep Diagnostics. We do a type 2 study, so this does have EEG. And I also got this data from my friend Cynthia. Big shout out to Cynthia. Cynthia. She gave me 6 months worth of data from a sleep lab that she runs, that she started, in-lab study, 5-bed lab, and crunched a ton of numbers for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this information to you quick because I know some of you have YouTube short attention spans. Then we'll dive into the data much more nuanced after. Hi, Business Jason here. I'm gonna give you some stats. Oh, excuse me, Jason. We know that's you. Those Business Jason and regular Jason are the same thing. AXG type 2 study, people that have absolutely diagnosis of absolutely nothing. Of the total people tested, 49 total people tested in a 6-month period. During that period, 59% were diagnosed with absolutely nothing at all. Now, Cynthia's in-lab study, of the 396 total people tested, 78 people were diagnosed with nothing. That is 20%. 20% diagnosed with nothing for her versus 60% diagnosed with nothing for me. That is a huge discrepancy. All right, YouTube short attention span people, go ahead and scooch your way out of here. Scooch, scooch. Scooch, 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 scooch. Let's get into those numbers a little bit. That's very interesting, but it's not really. So let me tell you a little bit about a typical study. So that's gonna be Cynthia's in-lab study. People that tend to go to in-lab studies have a pretty high level of screening. It's really pretty easy. They'll complain of daytime fatigue, daytime hypersomnolence, like meaning I'm super sleepy all the time, snoring, witnessed apnea, that's a hard one to beat, high blood pressure, things like that. Things that are really pretty obvious. So you would expect that people that go in for an in-lab study that have met that criteria are going to have a much higher number of people diagnosed with sleep apnea. Now let's look at my study, the AXG type 2 study. The kind of people that I get are mostly pilots. Of the 49 people tested, 35 of those people were pilots. Now those people come to me because they have to. Their pilot's license is at stake and they have to be tested because the FAA sends them a letter that says, you got to be tested for this or you're going to lose your license. So a lot of times they're flagged with something just as simple as at some point in time you had atrial fibrillation. That's what most of the people I test are pilots. That's what they're tested for. And so because of that, a lot of them come back as negative. A ton of them come back as negative. For pilots, it's actually 60%. Now the other people, the 14 people in that last 6-month period that were not pilots, they came to me because they were diagnosed originally with a type 3 study. The type 3 study showed they had very mild sleep apnea. They didn't trust the diagnosis. They wanted to dive into it a little bit more. And so they found me for a more accurate diagnosis. That's why there is such a discrepancy between an in-lab study and mine. I would trust the numbers from the in-lab study, which is about 20% are found to have absolutely nothing. Let's dive into this data a little bit more. First, I want to talk about the different levels of diagnosis. So we have nothing, that's going to be under an apnea-hypopnea index of 5, and typically the respiratory disturbance index, which includes respiratory effort-related arousals. An apnea-hypopnea index below 5 is going to be a diagnosis of nothing. Now, if you have an upper airway resistance syndrome diagnosis, you're typically going to have an apnea-hypopnea index, again, below 5, but your respiratory disturbance index is going to be typically 10 or higher. Now, a diagnosis of mild sleep apnea. Now remember, this can be any mix of obstructive apneas or hypopneas. Remember, it's the apnea-hypopnea index, number of apneas or hypopneas per hour of sleep. So if you have a mild AHI, apnea-hypopnea index, that's going to be from 5 to 15. So you stop breathing or your breathing is lessened so much that you have a blood oxygen desaturation of 4% or more, and that happens 5 to 15 times per hour of sleep. That is mild. Now, apnea-hypopnea index of 15 to 30, meaning you stop breathing or your breathing is lessened 15 to 30 times per hour of sleep, is going to be a moderate obstructive apnea diagnosis. And severe is going to be anything that is over 30 or more for an apnea-hypopnea index. So 30 times per hour or more, you stop breathing. That is how it's broken down. Now, if you want numbers on that, I found that of my 49 people tested, 10% had severe obstructive apnea versus the in-lab study was double that. 20% were found to have severe obstructive apnea. The moderate level, my study, AXG home sleep study, 16% had moderate sleep apnea in that 15 to 30 range. The in-lab study from Cynthia, 19%, still higher. The mild diagnosis, that 5 to 15 apnea-hypopnea index, I found that 12% of the people I tested had mild sleep apnea, whereas Cynthia found that 32% had mild sleep apnea. And now for the upper airway resistance syndrome, my study showed that 4% of the people I tested had upper airway resistance syndrome, whereas the in-lab study, 9% of people had upper airway resistance syndrome. That data is fascinating to me. So let's go back to the original question. I want to know how many people are diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea or with sleep apnea in general that go into an in-lab study. Most people think it's everyone. They're like, everyone has it. Why do they think everyone has it? Because they got diagnosed with sleep apnea and they didn't want it. Then they ask a couple other people and they say, yeah, I got diagnosed with sleep apnea. And they're like, ha ha, everyone has it. But the truth is not everyone does have it. And depending on what kind of study you have, if you have a type 3 study, type 3 studies suck. They really suck. They're not accurate. Let's just get rid of those. My type 2 study has accurate sleep-wake time, as does an in-lab study. Those are going to be more accurate. But then you get into how are you screened? My screening, they're kind of forced to come in. The FAA kind of has them by the short and curlies. They have to be studied, but they don't want to go into an in-lab study. But their criteria for coming in is weak. There's no real evidence that they have sleep apnea. That's why 60% of them have a negative diagnosis. Then you contrast that again with the in-lab study. they pretty much already know they have it. It's more of a formality at that point. So yeah, the number is going to be a lot lower as far as how many people are diagnosed with nothing. So we could look at it in another way. How many people are diagnosed with something that go in to have a sleep study? With me, I found that 40% are diagnosed with something versus an in-lab study, 80%. Double are diagnosed with something. If we actually did something where we tested every single person on earth, whether they're complaining of something or not, that number is going to be driven down even more. Meaning the number of people diagnosed with sleep apnea is going to be a lot smaller. That's because at that point, now you're testing people that have absolutely no complaints whatsoever. Kind of like the pilots. So I know sometimes the numbers seem like they're skewed high, but you really have to look at the mechanism of filtering people for who does and who does not get tested for sleep apnea. Now let's drop a little scam warning, because that way I can put scam in the title. If you're talking about a company that does their own home sleep testing, and then they have their own doctor that writes a prescription for you to buy CPAP equipment, and you buy that sleep app equipment from them, that seems to me a little sketchy. And I would think that those numbers are insanely high as far as who's diagnosed with sleep apnea. So consider a couple things before you call scam. How are you being screened for being tested? Who is doing the testing? And then who's potentially selling you the equipment after you actually are tested? And now is a really awkward time to mention and thank the sponsor of this video, CPAPsupplies.com. So I know it's such a simple question, but there's so much nuance to it. I wanted to share all of that with you. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet become a YouTube member, I'd appreciate that. A Patreon supporter. Check out my services at axgsleepdiagnostics.com. Hey, Christmas is coming. Check out my Amazon affiliate link down in the description box. Please know that I earn on all qualified purchases if you use my Amazon affiliate link. I would greatly appreciate that. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a good night. Bye. Clean your stinky mask with some Mask Bright, available at Amazon. Thank you to all watching, but an extra thick thanks, buddy, to Doug Toombs, Jason Georgiades, Patricia Espelong, Sarvesh Joshi, Stuart Hetherington, Mona Swearingen, Chungtu Chen, Edward Steiner, Deborah Permute, and Shannon Kerr, and another slightly less thick thanks, buddy, to all the other YouTube members, Patreon supporters, and other stuff.